Welcome to the broadcast, my fruits. Thank you so much for keeping me company over the last couple of segments as we look through the leaks that have emerged from Spare, and that's what we're going to continue to do. I wasn't expecting these leaks. I thought that I'd be able to read the entire tome in full and give you my response, but this is the way that it's happened, my dear, so we've got to roll with the punches, haven't we, and do what we can. So I'm trying to do what I can, and I know that you appreciate it and will take it in that spirit. So we will go on with that sort of thing. Now, I want to start with the issue of Catherine's warmth, because she is accused, so we hear throughout this tome, of being rather cold, icy, almost jellied, you'd think, this sort of fridge. You know, that's the impression that they seem to want to impart upon the world. Well, anything's possible, and I have not read the full tome. And nobody is perfect, including Catherine. So perhaps there is an icy side to her personality. Perhaps the pair of the Waleses are a little more grand than they could be. Who knows? I'm not going to write anything off just yet. But one occasion sprang to my mind, one event that I wanted to share with you for those that haven't seen it, because it illustrates very plainly to me, amongst all the other hundreds of pieces of footage of Catherine being very touchy-feely with crowds and children and old folk, going back more than 10 years, not just in recent years. You know, there's plenty of it. She doesn't seem to be shy or backwards in coming forwards, in showing affection, even physically. Perhaps if she is being reserved about that, it's for a really good reason, perhaps. Maybe Harry? Maybe it's trying to tell you something. But anyway, I wanted to share this incident because it is revealing. It was 2018. I believe it was 3 years after Charlotte was born. And in this waiting crowd for Catherine, there's an aisle that she walks down with a small, a modest gathering either side, but quite a sea of different faces there. And on one side was waiting Professor Jacqueline Dunkley Bent. Fabulous name, Professor Dunkley Bent. And she, 3 years before that, had been the midwife who had delivered Charlotte. So it had been, I would imagine, a number of years between when they'd been working together. And of course, they were working together in a professional capacity, but it's a very intimate role, and you're guiding your charge through labour and maternity and this, that, and seventh. So there's that relationship, but she waits there patiently, and as Catherine walks the aisle, she doesn't even try to get her attention. Just a nice smile is given, and Catherine almost walks past because there's so many people, very unlikely to recognise anyone. But she does. She spots the face of her old chum, immediately stops what she's doing, immediately. And you see in this footage, immediately, it is a natural reaction. There is no she's not second-guessing herself in any way. Do you see? No second-guessing whatsoever as she extends an arm and reaches out and immediately goes in for the hug. And this is all initiated by Catherine, our fair princess. All of it. Do you see? Is that the natural reaction, the natural response of somebody who is cosseted, precious, diva, grand? And trust me, my dears, I am not saying that those elements are not possible within either she or William. I am not. Because I've heard reliable stories of different kinds. We all have various facets to our diamond, don't we, my dear, if you know what I mean. We can all behave in different ways among different people in different circumstances. So nothing's entirely cut and dried or binary, but it certainly illustrates to me that she has a natural warmth that is unaffected, unobstructed, unabashed, unashamed, and it also shows me something else that's very interesting. Not that any of us here, we basketeers, I would suggest that very few of us believe any of these accusations of bigotry or racism or having some sort of disdain for those with a different skin colour, because we know it's nonsense on stilts, tripe on stilts, lies on stilts, and just plain old lies. But this was 2018, as I say. So this was before any of those insinuations of a colonial attitude, mentality, or sort of unconscious bias, and this, that, and the seventh. And so what I'm saying is there was no showboating. She wasn't putting on a display, a demonstration to show how down she is with her black friends. No, my dear, this was before all of that. And it wasn't even a thought in her head. Oh no, it was a beloved associate in a professional capacity. And all she wanted to do was reach out and hug her. And I'm sure she just wanted to stop and have a chat about old times and little Lottie. I don't mean to go on about it, my dear, but do you see the point that I'm trying to illustrate? Because they are painting this frosty picture of our fair princess, and I just won't have it. I just won't have it. No, if she hadn't thawed in the company of the warmth of Montesino, the sun that always shines, those rays that pierce through the most frigid igloos of Alaska, Inuit territory, my dear. She's hotter than climate change, isn't she, that Megan? She really is. And Harry, so warm with that red-headed, furious heat. Hot-headed heat. You know, they're just so... Maybe she didn't thaw for a reason. Reasons! Reasons! Come on, guys, come on. Reasons. And when Rachel Ragland was living here in the kingdom, if she'd had her wits about her, she could have learned about a bit about our society. And our society, like most nations, has its nuances between various demographics within the nation. And she was privy to a very rarefied part of the population. And she could have used that time not just to view the curiosities of that rarefied existence, but to actually try and understand them, and try and understand that not every woman is an archetypical woman, the kind that roll up for her ball-achingly dull podcasts, because 99% of those women on there had that syrupy effect, didn't they? That girl gang vibe of like, we're immediately sisters, I just knew when I met you was so special. And we can all be a bit guilty of that, my dear. I mean, I certainly am, especially when I'm a bit tipsy, my dear. I make friends very easily. I just go out, I take to the streets, I speak to the person at the till, I hang out at the bar, prop it up, and immediately, the fruit flies descend. Ladies, men, everything in between, everything turns up, my dear, and I've got a certain magnetism, and some of us have, some of us don't, and that's the lot in life. Anyway, I digress. What I'm trying to say is, my dear, that we can all do the instant busy mate thing to a certain degree, but you don't have to populate your entire life with these sort of peripheral phony friendships. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with camping it up if you're in that social butterfly element, is what I'm trying to say. The cocktail party vibe, my dear. You get conspiratorial with someone, you drag them into the loo, do a line or two, have a bit of champagne together. Whatever it is, my love, to pep up the evening. And then oftentimes you'll forget about each other by next Thursday. That's the party life. But then, one or two will come along for the ride, and you'll develop a relationship, and a friendship will be born. But not everyone is what I'm trying to say. Not everyone is your instant sister, and we have such a bond and a connection. And even dead people like Diana are suddenly deep in my heart, and they're speaking to me and they're guiding to me. It is so delusional. It's delusional. I would be very curious to know how many of these cultivated friendships that she's made over the last few years linger. Be very interesting to find out. But who knows? They might. Who knows? Birds of a feather flock together and all of that. But that is not the royal way, and in many ways that is certainly not the English way, because we have a certain reserve which was shown by the Queen. I mean, you don't see Harold and Rachel slagging off the Queen for not hugging Meghan every time that she's in the house. Do you? Because that wasn't the Queen's way. She had the English reserve. And Catherine also has the English reserve, as does William, but they are somewhere in between the old world and the new world, so they are not withholding affection in any way, as we see demonstrated all the time, and as we saw where she spotted her friend in the crowd. But the Harkles could have used that moment, is what I'm saying. Use that time to understand the difference in warmth, the different qualities of warmth. On the one hand, you have the gentle glow of the coal fire or the campfire, which takes a little bit more work, rubbing your sticks together to strike a light, nurturing the flames, the kindling, getting it going, and then basking in the glow of that fire. On the other side of things, the other kind of warmth, the Harkle warmth, or the Megan warmth, I should say, you have central heating. Central heating, which is very efficient. It will fill every corner of a room. You can turn it on instantly and get hot immediately. And I'm not saying that they require central heating in Montecito. They don't. They have the desert sun. But what I am saying is that you have, if I was to offer you central heating for an afternoon, or the soft and gentle embers of a coal fire to read in front of for a few hours, to have your cocoa with, to make love to your fancy piece, all the beautiful activities of life. Which form of heat would you choose? Well, that's up to you, my dear, but I know what side my bread's buttered, and I know what kind of fire I like to shag in front of. Sources in the publishing world have revealed that Prince Harry was trying to backtrack. He changed his mind about releasing the book and tried to stop publication of it, according to sources that have been speaking to the media. And maybe Harry will start to see, seeing as he's making so many headlines at the moment, that all these leaks and briefings that he's accusing the palace of are very hard to control. All these whispers that do the round. And you know what? In a few years' time, I think that he will also find that stuff that he confided with his Archewell team, everybody in his Montecito enclave, and same goes for Meghan, that whispers will reach other outlets, and he will begin to understand that it's not always as easy as you think to keep stories to yourself. He's been blaming Camilla for shouting from the rooftops, when in fact she did no such thing, but we'll cover that a little bit later. He wanted to cancel his memoir, and this was after attending the Platinum Jubilee, which was very interesting. He attended the Jubilee. That was when he got cold feet. It's very obvious why, the timing of it. Apparently it was a couple of weeks after this happened. And this source says that was such a dark day. Everyone had been working so hard on this project in utmost secrecy, and with the expectation that this would turn out to be one of the biggest and most historic books the world ever got to publish. Oh, please. And then, you'd think it was the Bible or something, wouldn't you? And then, just after Harry's last trip to London, the boss walked in and said, "He's pulled it. He doesn't want to do it." Shock horror. I can't tell you, it's an enormous and expensive operation getting a book like this ready, and everyone informed was devastated. And also, by the way, apparently the manuscript had to be absolutely scoured for Americanisms, because Harry has adopted a lot of the vernacular from what is stereotypically American. Now, please don't be offended, Americans, because we have plenty of our own dumbing downs with language on these shores, so it's no shade to you, my dears, but in this case it was word like awesome. Everything's awesome. Awesome. So everything had to be translated, especially from American English to British English, to make Harry sound as if he's more English and possibly a bit more eloquent. So it was done to flatter him, but also to indicate to international audiences his nationality, his original nationality, before he was so very influenced by the other side of the pond. But it is very telling, the timing of this, because it was after the Jubilee. There's only one reason why he suddenly got cold feet, and you know what that reason was. Please don't forget the unbridled joy and love of both the Jubilee and the funeral time. But we're talking about the Jubilee here, the unbridled love and passion, as those streets thronged, not just with old white people, as Meghan and Harry were expecting. I think it was an enormous shock to their system and their strategy to roll up in Old Blighty and see the multicultural crowds. You remember them? Of all ages. Just as many young, enthusiastic people lining those streets, lining the mall, lining the country, and taking an interest from abroad. It was blanket love, joy, and praise. And they weren't even barely getting a mention, apart from, I mean, they made a few headlines for matters of sophistry, but it was mainly disparagement, to be honest, or speculation. Certainly not adulation. It was the royal family and the Queen, of course, that was getting all the adulation. So can you imagine? That must have struck fear into their very hearts that they were about to publish this tome while Elizabeth lived and breathed. That lily-livered boy. No wonder he was frightened. Well, who knows why he changed his mind and eventually went through with the release. I don't know if he changed his mind before or after the Queen died. But actually, my hunch is that it was financial implications of cancelling the whole project, because a lot of money had already been put into it. So there were a lot of financial implications at stake, and a lot of unhappy people in the publishing world, if this is all true, and the repercussions of that and their reliability. Especially while they were having run-ins with people at Netflix and Spotify throughout all these months as well. It wouldn't have played well. We are told that William and Harry begged Charles not to marry Camilla. They feared she would be the wicked stepmother. I'm not quite sure why, but that's what they feared. Should be the wicked stepmother. They begged him. They said, please, just be with her. You don't have to marry her, just be with her, because there'll be constant comparisons to Diana. I think it's a strange logic, but I guess they were children, if this is true. Harry is providing a feast, by the way, a feast to all the tabloids that he reckons takes advantage of him. Their beloved other arch nemesis, the Daily Mail. They're having a field day. They're just serving all of this up on a platter, because this is exactly what tabloids were made for. And he's feeding it to them. I suppose he's justifying it by saying, well, I'm getting 20 million out of it, apparently, and getting it all out of my system. But, are you starting to see, as the world is starting to see, the dignity in shutting up, the dignity in keeping the trap shut, in never complain, never explain? Beginning to see, right? Yeah, maybe Harry is too, but one can only hold one's breath and hope. But then one would probably die of suffocation. Harry then makes the extraordinary and bold and disingenuous claim that Camilla sacrificed him to improve her own public image, and that she leaked details of her conversation with William when she first met William. Harry says there were pinpoint accurate details, none of which had come from Willie, of course. They could only have been leaked by one other person present. Well, he says that she leaked it to the press as part of a campaign to marry Charles against her son's wishes. Now, this is such a misrepresentation of what actually occurred. There's no real perspective in it, and in fact it turns his truth into a lie. It's just wrong. Camilla is the last person to go rushing to the press. She is famously rather gossipy and rather conspiratorial, but, and there is a huge but, that is absolutely within the confines of a moral framework that she has, that understands with total accuracy the limits and the boundaries of what can be approached and what can't. Yes, she can be gossipy, but she knows the line, my dear. She knows the line. Now, in actual fact, Camilla did not leak anything to the press. And if Harry's researchers had done their business, in fact, if Harry himself had put any thought into it, then he would know that it was Camilla's private secretary who was responsible for the leak, who admitted that she was responsible for the leak, and resigned due to the leak. Actually, it was rather similar to the curious case of Susan Hussey, that scandal, where she resigned, but was, in the case of this private secretary, Camilla's for sure, was really rather sacked, but she was actually reinstated several years later. So, in a way, it was a symbolic gesture. It was after Diana died that Camilla hired this gal, Amanda McManus, her name is. She went on after this resignation, as I say, to work with Camilla again until last year. So it was a long and trusting relationship. She, as Camilla's private secretary, was obviously privy to the logistics of the meeting with William, and it seems that perhaps some extra information was shared with her. Well, unfortunately, she told her husband, this is the most trusting of friends will tell a spouse. They will. Once you've sworn them to secrecy, it's very rare to find one that won't actually blab to a spouse or partner in past, even if it's not even meant in any treacherous way, which there certainly wasn't. This was mentioned in passing to her spouse, who happened to be a media executive, and it wasn't him that did the blabbing to the press. He then mentioned it to a colleague of his, and it was the colleague that went to the press. This was all put under investigation at the time, and a statement was released by Amanda McManus. She said, "I am very sorry. It is a matter of great regret to me that chance remarks of mine led to the disclosure in the press of the private meeting between Mrs. Parker Bowles, as she was, and Prince William. I am so very sorry for the distress this has caused. Above all, my shame is that I have failed those who demand loyalty and trust, particularly my remarkable employer, Camilla Parker Bowles. I am very sorry to be leaving, but as the person responsible for this unhappy chain of events, I cannot with honour remain in this position." So a very regrettable incident there, and one can absolutely understand why Prince William was annoyed. But, get the facts right, Harry. Get the facts right. Perhaps Camilla over-confided something to her private secretary, who she trusted. And she had good reason to trust her private secretary, because she was a trustworthy woman, but she made the fatal mistake of telling her partner, her spouse. And that's the way that the leaks went, like a cascade. She made that fatal mistake. She did. So it's not as Harry portrays it. It's not Camilla running off to the press to try and bolster her image. Do you see the difference? This is pure Harkledom, isn't it? This is everything that they do all the time. Snatching the truth and doing something really rather obfuscating with it. Now, my understanding is that just 9 months after Diana died, just 9 months, so still really rather raw and fresh in his mourning, Prince William reached out to Camilla. He reached out to her because he wanted help organising his father's 50th birthday party, and he decided to reach out to her. Now, if that's true, that speaks a lot. That speaks a lot to William's maturity, doesn't it? Can you imagine Harry doing that? I mean, of course he was younger at the time, but I can't even really imagine him doing it now. But William did that. He reached out to Camilla. So he put those wheels in motion. And when it comes to the campaign, and granted, I haven't read the full tome, so this could all be put in context. I don't know, at some point. But from what I read, it doesn't seem to be. Camilla seems to be being painted as a villain in these extracts, or some sort of Machiavellian campaign going on. Well, yes, there was a campaign. Actually, I spoke about it in a broadcast months and months ago, but it was put in the charge of a chap called Mark Boland, who is quite a character, can be rather naughty, it has to be said, but is very effective. He was actually charged with reshaping Charles's image. And it's why you began to see, in the wake of Diana's death, photographs of him appearing with the Spice Girls, having his bottom pinched or whatever it was, lipstick on the cheek. Things that you would not really associate with Charles in earlier times. But they wanted to ease up his image, bring out the side of him that's more approachable. You began seeing greetings cards of him with his sons looking a bit more casual and relaxed, a hint more affection in them, this kind of thing, not quite so solid and staged, which was also keeping up with the times in general anyway, and moving and evolving as society does. But in his capacity as a PR executive, if you will, he was hired as an assistant private secretary to Charles and was thought to be very effective at rehabilitating his image. Now, this Mark Boland character was a little mischievous. Gay boy was. He married the first openly gay conservative peer who has a fantastic name, Guy Black, Baron Black of Brentwood. But as some gay boys want to do, and yes, some straight boys and lots of straight girls, of course, but I'm talking about a particular type, and you know the particular type, as they want to do, with a little sprinkling of mischief, shall we say, a bit of mischief and naughtiness and a bit of fun. He was known for spreading rather detrimental stories about other royals to make the royal he was representing or rehabilitating look good. And I'm afraid that, to my recollection, characters like Prince Philip even, and the Wessex clan, Sophie and Edward, suffered at his hands a bit because he would sacrifice, as Harry would say, sacrifice their image to bolster Charles's while he was under his charge. So he had that unfortunate side to his character. And a lot of these ploys of his often backfired. So they weren't always successful. One thing he was very successful at was sort of engineering the publicity drive around the moment when Camilla met our Queen, which was in 2000. It was at Highgrove at a party there. I think it was the 60th birthday party of the former King Constantine of Greece. But the wheels had been put in motion for Campaign Camilla dating back to 1997. Camilla had sent out a batch of invitations to a lot of the movers and shakers, editors, publishers, a sprinkling of celebrities, this kind of thing, in 1997, or at least that was the plan, to her Osteoporosis Society charity, which she works with a lot. But Diana died. Diana died in August of that summer, so that was abandoned, obviously, and it was sort of put on ice until 1999, a couple of years later, that moment where we saw Camilla and Charles officially together for the first time, leaving a party outside the Ritz, and the paparazzi photographers went wild. So yes, it is true to say that there was a campaign. It's unfortunate we have to use words as sterile as campaign, PR, orchestrated, all these things, and no one's denying that happens, but this is an institution or firm, as they want to put it, and they had such a mountain to climb because Camilla was absolutely loathed here. But it's really a credit to her and not the machine around them that we are where we are now, where she is experiencing a wave of respect and goodwill. It's down to Camilla because it's the kind of stuff that PR don't buy, my love. It's the kind of stuff that comes from keeping it stum, keeping your head down, never complaining, not one whisper of complaint, never complaining, never explaining, as we've spoken about many times. She's done it so well. Whether you love her or loathe her, you gotta give the woman props for the fact that she just put up and shut up every disparagement against her, every breadroll chucked at her, and got on with the job. And she has worked hard throughout the autumn of her life, and coming into the winter seasons now with absolutely no sign of stopping or quitting pace. She has proved herself through her character and her spirit, not just through the machinations of a PR machine and PR spin and a campaign, because authenticity like that can't be faked, which is one of the reasons why people had begun having a problem with Meghan after they got a chance to know her. Not immediately, after they got a chance to see her character and what she was all about. Do you understand? Quite the opposite, in fact, of Camilla's experience, who was initially loathed and hated internationally and has come to be respected. Harry tells us in Spare that William had his reservations about Meghan from the get-go. Wise old Willie, don't you think? He had his reservations. Now, what caring brother wouldn't tell his brother not to rush in? Because apparently that's what William said, to slow down, take it easy, bide your time, and seemed to arch an eyebrow at the fact that this was an American actress we were talking about, because it's a culture clash. It's a culture clash, and nobody can deny that because we've seen it play out before us. So one can only imagine, because Harry is rather confessional, and you would imagine he would be extremely confessional to his fiancée at the time, going on to be his wife. I have very little doubt that all of this was reported back to Rachel Ragland. William's reluctance to get on board with it immediately. So Meghan must have stored all that information, known that William and perhaps Catherine had their doubts about the relationship from the start, or at least the speed at which it was accelerating. And perhaps that went some way towards the qualities that William recognised in Meghan of being difficult, rude and abrasive, because they're the words Harry uses to tell us what William said about her. She was difficult, rude and abrasive. And I'm mentioning this because Harry tells us in this tome, actually looking at my notes, I can't remember if it was in the tome or in one of his television interviews that are coming up, but he tells us that William's opinion of Meghan was dictated by the media. And this is another one. This is another corker that he's gotten completely wrong. No, my dear. This all relates to that dog bowl scandal, the dog bowl incident at Not Cot, where they scrapped in the kitchen. You know the rest of it by now. The timing is very significant. The timing is significant, you see, because if it happened in 2019, then this was after Jason Knauf had submitted his bullying complaint against Meghan, which was in October 2018. But that was well before the media reported on it. So how could William's view of Meghan been influenced by the media? They hadn't reported on it, or any of these bullying claims. It was known about, it was all underway, but it was all under wraps, it was all hush-hush. No, Harry. William was basing his opinion on his own experience and the experience, what he'd been hearing from his staff. Do you see the sophistry they spin? News didn't surface until March 2021, 2 years after this alleged altercation. 2 years! 2 years! And somehow you're marrying William's opinion with that of the press. How does that work? In a time capsule? I ask you. Not everybody can get the starring role, and not everybody wants it, you know? This is the thing. William wasn't especially ambitious for the role in that day. It is such a huge mantle to take on. But the telling thing is that when William would complain about it, because he would often complain about it, Harry would chip in and say, I'll do it, I'll be king. You know, He always wanted the top job, which is what we've always said. Never got over it. He never got over it. But he's not the first troublesome spare in history. He's really not. There have been many of them. Richard the Lionheart, for example. He had a younger brother called John, who tried to usurp him. When he went off to the Third Crusade, tried to usurp the Lionheart. Yes, he did. Then there was Edward IV, King Edward IV. His younger brother was George, another George, the Duke of Clarence, and he attempted to overthrow Edward 4 times. 4 times. Try again, my dear. And famously, of course, Queen Mary. There was Queen Mary who tried to overthrow her sister, Elizabeth I, in the Tower of London. So these kind of sibling rivalries are nothing new, are they, my dear? Nothing new. Now, isn't it rather interesting, my dear, that Prince Harry is also doing exactly the same as he accused Thomas Senior of doing, which ended up causing Meghan to ghost her father. He's doing a lot of the same things that he's accused Thomas of doing. You know, giving interviews, offering his side of the story only, communicating with his family via 60 Minutes. All these kind of things, you know, and gabbing all the time about how he only wants to reconcile. I only want to reconcile, you know. These are all the vulgar things that he saw Thomas Markle doing and complained about. Well, he's doing it himself. He doesn't seem to like it when it's dished up to him, does he, in the same way? Well, that's enough nonsense for now. Anyway, you know, I've recently rediscovered brioche with a nice lashing of butter on top of it. Just simple, sometimes with a little thinly spread. I've got some tasty black cherry conserve and some blueberry conserve as well. It's absolutely delicious, the brioche I've got. It's, for those in the kingdom, it's from Waitrose. It's really nice. And I might have recommended it before, but rice pudding, you know, you can get it made by Ambrosia cream rice pudding. If you're in the kingdom, get the Marks and Spencer version, their creamy rice pudding in the tin cans. It is absolutely spectacular, delicious. Much nicer than the Ambrosia version. I know, that's the popular one. So there you are, Waitrose brioche and Marks and Sparks rice pudding. Dreamy, absolutely dreamy. And that's nice with a little dollop of conserve in the middle as well, my dears. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll be back soon with another broadcast. Don't you fear my fruit crumbles. I'll be back very soon so we can keep chin-wagging away, can't we, and shooting the breeze. Thank you for joining me. Lovely to see you. Thank you for popping in. And if you fancy treating me to a cupcake or to keep me in coffee to get through all these broadcasts, my tip jar is in the description box below. Losing the plot, my dear. Or you don't have to do that. You really don't. I'm not just going to fleece you. You can also just leave me a thumbs up if you so care to. Actually, it's rather vulgar asking for likes and dislikes, isn't it, my dear? We won't go down that path. Just blow me a kiss as usual or send a good thought. That's all that's needed. I'll see you soon. And toodles.